In the early hours of January 30th, 1968, as much of South Vietnam celebrated Tet the Lunar New Year, the streets were quiet. Firecrackers popped in alleyways, families gathered in homes, and even the war, for a moment, seemed to pause. General Westmoreland, the top commander in Vietnam, had claimed that the enemy was weakening. President Lyndon B. Johnson echoed the same confidence, yet in one night, that illusion was shattered. Public support for the war plummeted. CBS anchor Walter Cronkite, a trusted voice in American homes, visited Vietnam after Tet and returned with a grim conclusion. Americans began questioning not only the war, but the leadership directing it. Trust in government eroded. The anti-war movement swelled, campuses erupted in protest, and the call to bring the troops home grew louder. Over 14,000 civilians were killed, and countless homes and neighborhoods were destroyed. It remains one of the most pivotal moments in modern warfare, not because of the territory won or lost, but because of the minds it changed. In the end, it wasn't about bombs or bullets. It was about breaking the will of a superpower through the power of shock, surprise, and sustained defiance. And in that, the Tet Offensive was not just a battle. It was a turning point in history. But its true legacy lies not in the body count, but in the shift it created. Before Tet, Americans believed in victory. After Tet, they believed in withdrawal. It redefined the Vietnam War from a winnable campaign to a costly quagmire. It transformed political calculations, ended careers, and changed how wars would be viewed, reported, and protested from that point forward. Though the United States continued fighting in Vietnam for several more years, the Tet Offensive marked the beginning of the end of public support. It was the moment the American people stopped believing victory was possible and started believing the cost was too high. To say that we are mired in stalemate seems the only realistic, yet unsatisfactory, conclusion, he told the nation. President Johnson reportedly turned to an aide and said, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost Middle America." That moment marked a turning point not just in the war, but in Johnson's presidency. Within weeks, he shocked the nation by announcing he would not seek re-election. The Tet Offensive saw attacks on major cities like Da Nang and even the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. No place felt safe. South Vietnamese and American forces were caught off guard. Streets became battlegrounds. General Vo Nguyen Giap and other planners knew they could not win in a traditional military sense, but they understood the power of perception. By striking during Tet, a time of supposed truce, and by targeting urban centers, they sent a message of strength, resilience, and defiance. It showed that the communist forces could reach into the very heart of South Vietnam, and that they would not be easily defeated. In Hue, the fighting was so intense it lasted nearly a month. With the city almost completely destroyed, the communists briefly held parts of the city, executing South Vietnamese officials and sympathizers in what became known as the Hue Massacre. That illusion was shattered by the sudden roar of gunfire. The Viet Cong suffered heavy losses, tens of thousands were killed, and their ability to fight large-scale battles was crippled for years to come. But it didn't matter, because the real victory wasn't in territory, it was in perception. The Tet Offensive was a propaganda triumph for North Vietnam. Television footage showed chaos, destruction, and American troops scrambling in cities the public thought were secure. For the first time, the U.S. public saw that the war wasn't nearing its end, it was escalating. The gap between what officials said and what people saw was too wide to ignore. In a stunning and coordinated attack, over 80,000 Viet Cong and North Vietnamese troops launched a massive assault across more than 100 cities and outposts in South Vietnam. It became known as the Tet Offensive, and it wasn't just a military campaign, it was a psychological earthquake that shook the American war effort to its core. Though the communists did not win militarily, they achieved something far more devastating. They changed the narrative. They showed the world, and more importantly the American public, that the war in Vietnam was far from over. For years, U.S. leaders had insisted victory was near. Militarily, the United States and South Vietnamese forces managed to repel the attacks. Back in America, the psychological impact was enormous. The belief that victory was just around the corner dissolved overnight. The Tet Offensive also exposed a growing credibility gap, the space between official government statements and the truth on the ground. From the North Vietnamese perspective, the offensive was a bold and bloody gamble. The Tet Offensive left an indelible scar. The Tet Offensive didn't end the Vietnam War, but it ended America's belief in how it was being fought.